You are listening to episode 180 of The Graveyard Shift, which is 20 episodes off the big 200, lads. Do you think we'll get it done this year?
Nope.
No.
Good to know. Good to know. It's just good that everyone knows where they stand.
Why have you frozen? Oh.
I was checking my emails. Hello.
Hello,
Hey.
everyone. So we talked on the last episode about kind of in principle about the coronavirus and everything like that. But how are you guys actually coping? Tell us about how you're coping with it. Greg is pointing to the book Broken, published in 2015.
Anyways, was it really?
I don't know. That was a guess.
I have no idea. I thought it was 2017, but
it was not 2017. I'll tell you that much.
I don't.
No, that was only no.
It's just meant to be a joke. It's up there with Sam Harris and Diane Butler Bass and what else we got there? James Martin.
There's some
You
good
mean
stuff.
Jonathan Martin?
No, James Martin.
Francis.
Father James Martin.
Oh, James Martin. Father James. Sorry.
Francis Spufford is wonderful. I love his book Unapologetic. It's
Chris
a
Teppet.
book.
Yeah, there's some good books up there.
Love it. So, Greg, what are you reading during the lockdown?
I'm reading the book Broken by. Actually, this is a good. I'm reading a few books. This one here is a good one.
Ooh, Jay-Z.
Jay-Z? Ooh,
Nice.
wow.
Yeah. It's about the cultural phenomena of and the movement created by the hip hop revolution and how they found voice there. That community and wider communities have found voice there. It's very, very good. I'm reading this one.
Reading the Bible with Rabbi Jesus.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because it's gonna be audio as well. So yeah, Jay-Z by Michael Eric Dyson, Made in America, and then Reading the Bible with Rabbi Jesus by Louis Tverberg.
Guys,
and then
how did this happen? Greg, look at Alan. I know you don't like to.
hey, I know.
Available in hardback and paperback, apparently.
And I'm reading this as well, actually, by Kate Bowler.
Oh.
Kate Bowler wrote my favorite book that I read last year called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I Have Loved.
Oh,
yeah,
yes, that was a great book.
Yeah.
This lady is very
wonderful.
serious. This is like a thesis about the precarious power of evangelical women and celebrities, celebrities.
Cool.
Very cool.
Those are my
Cool.
kind of like fun books, but not fun books. My like reading books. But the other books I'm reading, this one I'm reading for fun. It's about the greatest climber of all time.
48. Oh, cool.
Wow.
You know you like it,
Nice.
Scott.
I don't. This is like when you made me go to the cinema to watch Man on Wire.
Ooh.
Oh, that's a great film.
It was a better film than I
Yes.
thought it was going to be, to be fair. Yeah.
I try to figure out what else I'm
You,
reading.
you can't use an example to slame yourself because it's like the time you brought me that movie that was really cool. Dang it.
I'm mainly just talking about the feeling I had before. I'm sure I would enjoy that book if I read it, but it's the feeling I get thinking
Well,
about
you've got
reading
time.
it that's problematic.
Yeah.
If you want book recommendations to read, like this obviously is a great read, The Giving Tree.
I
By
never read it, actually.
Charles Silverson. Oh, it's such a good read.
Really?
Yeah. I love this one too. It's a children's book. Sean Tan, The Red Tree. So good.
Wow.
And then this is beautiful as well. A Child of Books by Oliver Jeffers. So
Oh.
yeah, I've had those on my shelf for a while, but yeah, I'm loving my reading right now. I'm enjoying the process of like digging into some stuff. It helps me as well. Sorry, Scott, did I distract you there?
No, Scott's looking for a book.
I'm
There
getting a
has
book.
to be a book somewhere in here.
He's on video.
We all have
So-
books, eh?
And then my last read, which I actually genuinely am reading right now too, is this by the Sunlight. We got Sunlight out here.
Chuck Palahniuk.
Yeah, he's the guy who wrote Fight Club originally. This is it's a book about writing, but he's really, really good.
Chuck
as well.
Palahniuk
Oh, wow.
is bananas. He wrote Fight Club, didn't he? Yeah.
That's right.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my stack right now, as it goes.
Um,
Cool.
this okay. So currently, my microphone is sitting on one of the books that is relevant to my life at the
Oh,
moment.
that's where my other books are. Oh yeah, my other two are there. Wait.
Oh,
Yeah, I
boy.
have this one here. I'm looking forward to reading Douglas Copeland's Bit Rot.
Douglas Copeland has not been great since 15 minutes before he released J-Pod.
Yeah, it's probably true. It's always been great. I do like him though. I'm committed to that author. And then this one here is what I'm really looking forward to. The Blue
Toni Morrison.
by Toni Morrison.
Wow.
Serious book. So yeah. So anyways, that's got my stack. It'll probably take me. I'd say hopefully I'll be through those by April, middle of April.
Nice.
Cool.
So this is what I'm working on at the moment.
God. Oh dear.
The new
I have
dictionary of
that.
Christian ethics and pastoral theology.
Oh,
So
loving it.
Wow.
for my master's, I'm having to write essays on ethics, and so that's a pretty serious endeavor. But I have to say, I'm actually really loving it. And then we're also doing an Anglicanism module at the moment, which has me studying some really interesting books on the Church of Ireland from a global perspective. I can't show you the books that I'm reading for fun, the books because they're on my Kindle, but I'm reading a trilogy called The Lies of Loch Lamora. It
does sound like that, doesn't it?
It's a trilogy
It does.
about a group of thieves in a fictional city called Camor, and there are some really compelling characters. It's very, very enjoyable. So I'm book 3 at the moment. So the first one is kind of in the town. The second one's kind of pirate based. And then the third one is, I won't spoil anything on that. And then, but if I could
There's
recommend,
no spoiling. Did you just forget?
no, I know what it's about. It's just, I don't want to ruin any of the revelations of the third book. But the third book is
Because it's
really
dodgy. Good. It's dodgy, right? That's why.
It's actually not remotely dodgy. I've
It's
read a
that
dodgy
sort of
book
trilogy,
or two.
Eh?
I've read books I would not recommend to the general public, and this would not be one of them. This one is a very safe recommendation.
Yeah, it's called the Bible.
You pulled out children's books there. We found this children's book when we were in the US, and I actually found it one of the most moving children's books I've ever seen. It's called When I Pray for You by Matthew Paul Turner. He used to have a book. He used to have a blog called. He used to have a blog.
I'm okay, Scott. I'm here with you.
He used to have a blog called Jesus Needs New PR, and he is.
That's good.
It's actually phenomenal. He also has one called When God Made You, and I think one called When God Made the World. But it's so beautifully illustrated and it's wonderfully written. I love it. So.
That's cool.
Those are my recommendations.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool.
Al?
Al?
Well, I am doing Brave Mouth at the moment. Billy Connolly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
That's it, upside down. It's absolutely superb. Loving it. Really, really enjoying it. And
it's written by his wife, right?
Greg. Yes, it is. Yeah, his
Stevenson
wife.
And this is the second book she's written about his life.
It's the second one. The first one's just called Billy. And so this was Brave Mouth. And so it's kind of going through some of the stories. You would have heard some of them in concert, but also where he's got them and also feedback from the first book that they did just in relation to just his difficult journey in life with family that was quite abusive and whatnot. So, yeah, it's beautiful, powerful. This one that Greg was told me about, a funny story, actually. Greg only was telling me about this book again. Recently goes, oh, that sounds really good. I'll have to get that. Wait a minute. And I checked, I already had it, which I'd ordered about 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm kind of going, that's the sort of where I'm at with my books, ones that I have and ones I haven't used. And this one is a good one too, Eugene Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
This book.
Yeah,
really good. So yeah, it's a few of them. And I have a couple of Batman graphic novels that are up by my bedside at the moment. So
lovely.
A good eclectic read happening here amongst us. I like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I did actually, just as in relation to some of the different things that we're doing, I've just completed the Nolan Batman trilogy with Andrew.
Oh,
he had never seen them, and so we watched them together.
Yes, on video,
on DVD,
and on the VHS tape,
on the Blu-ray. So that was really cool, and we're going through the '89 Michael Keaton Batmans now as well. So we did Batman, and we got Batman Returns tonight.
Do you have them on DVD?
Huh?
You have them on DVD.
Blu-ray.
Does my Xbox play Blu-ray?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh no, does it?
It should.
it should do. I think. Do you have a PS4 or Xbox?
Oh.
Xbox. I don't know about Xbox and Blu-ray, to be honest.
Xbox. I have an Xbox One X. Yeah. So yeah, I'll have to borrow those off you, Al.
You have an Xbox
Yeah,
One
I
X?
know,
Oh, man,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you
hey,
go.
we're done.
That's what
So
success
come on
looks like,
round.
Scott.
Um,
Scott. That's what success looks like. No,
Yeah.
the motor on our S was grinding like bad, like
Oh.
making the worst of sounds.
mm.
And I was like, man, if we get locked down, quarantine without the Xbox, it's all bad.
That's a very fair point.
I don't know whether you saw there was some great photographs going around in relation to you think your quarantine is going bad, and there was some guy, he put up a photograph of his bathroom was not even completed yet, and all the workers just stopped and finished. Some other person, they had no kitchen, and then somebody else, they turned on the TV and it was just this big green screen. As you know, your quarantine is going to be bad when you realize the television's just died.
Okay.
Man.
Speaking of TV, I want us to move on to what we're actually going to talk about. But does anyone have Netflix recommendations for people before they move on?
I'm not sure what's appropriate. Because I've been watching a show which is very popular right now, but it takes a certain temperament to watch it.
The Crown.
So I'm not sure where our age. Yes, The Crown. I'm not sure where our age profile is on the podcast.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm watching Netflix.
Yep. Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, you are.
I would recommend. I don't know if it's for everyone, but Ugly Delicious with David Chang.
Oh yeah.
It's a cooking show, but it's a lot more than a cooking show. And season 2 is just out, and the first episode is about him. They're expecting a child, and so they just jump into like kids' foods and stuff like that, and like the lifestyle of a chef. It's way more than just a show about food. But it's there's a real heart to that show that I really, really love. So
I think
that's
I've been spending most of my time. We actually have dug out the board games, so playing Cluedo and Monopoly and Frustration. Oh, I hate that game. It's very frustrating.
Game of life.
Oh no, not really. Seriously, times are not that desperate. Times are not that desperate.
So I actually have a stack of video games up. I mean, of board games up here. But myself, Christina, and our housemates played Alchemists the other day, which is an amazing board game where you're like trying to figure out what ingredients make which potions and stuff like that. You actually download an app for your phone, so when you want to check, you put the 2 ingredients on your little board, and then the algorithm changes every time for the app because you have a different code every time you go in. And then when you hold up your phone with the camera on it, it captures the 2 ingredients, and then it tells you what potion it makes. Like it's really cool. That was a really cool 2 hours the other day.
A quick update. It took Al and I 45 minutes to get our microphone to work on this Zoom. So that game there, it seems like it's a little bit out of our pay grade, right, Al?
Yeah, totally. I'm thinking, which button do I press now?
But Greg, it might be different from the games that you were talking about. Your journey to Alchemists might not be too traumatic, but Al suggested the Game of Life. So, that might be a bit of a jump. Yeah.
We
got Monopoly, we got Scrabble, we got Cluedo. It's all good. It's all good.
We've also been a couple other coping things. Alex and I every other morning will drive to a View with our keep cups that we make coffee here at home, and we just drive and just sit there, play some music, look at the view, chill out, hang out, and then about every other day I'm still running, which is great because I live out in the country, so you really can't. You don't bump into people at all. Yeah. And so you go out at the right times and I can get a good, run in without. So cool. So I think between reading and of course like Netflix and stuff like that, but also running and spending time with the family, the time's passing, but then you go, this is only 2 weeks out of possibly 12 or 16, check in with me at week 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A whole nother conversation. You know what I mean? Like
by week 16, I'm either going to have aced my masters or be a full-time professional FIFA player, and I'll let you decide which one of those is more likely.
Oh, I know what my money's on.
I literally have 19 I'm waiting for the new tournament to start on FIFA this evening. I have 19 player packs to open tonight that I have been saving just for this particular event. It's
But generally, though, I actually have
Dude.
been considering if this is going to go on, if I could go full time with my PhD, because I mean,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, take the time to like. I mean, why not? Like, also, what else are you gonna do? But like, you know, what?
exactly. I mean, like, why help other people when I can leave this crisis with a PhD?
I know, Greg. Greg, consistency is where it's at. So just keep plowing your furrow, buddy.
You keep doing what you do.
All right. So this week on the podcast, we, Greg, I'm assuming you sent this. Did you?
I did.
Yep. There was a fascinating video the other day on
Always a good assumption.
on BBC.com called the headline for the article is the virtual reality church that isn't shutting its doors. So let's take a quick look at that video and then we can chat about it.
We're kind of one church in many metaverses.
Hey, how are you?
I don't want
Welcome. How you doing? No flying today. No flying today.
You know, Jesus was dead and buried and rose again. And man, you would think it would have just been amazing. Yeah, Jesus is here. Let's go start this church. And then he bails. He takes off. Hey, Sophia, nice to see you. Thanks for coming to our church today.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes we kind of do crazy things. One day, it was the summer of 2016, and I was blown away. I was like, man, look at this world in 360. And in that moment, I thought, you know what I'd like to do? It'd be fun to start a church here. It's just a whim of a thought. You know, we started out, with just a handful of people. It was just one service. And then many people from Europe were like, Pastor, we love your church, but it's like 1 or 2 in the morning. So we expanded to VR Church Europe. And then many people were like from New Zealand and the Asian countries saying, we want to be a part of VR Church. And we probably have several hundred people that are part of the church. Our vision is to spread our love, to establish these faith communities across different time zones, but not just time zones, metaverses. So AltSpace is a metaverse. It's like a virtual city. There's a few other ones called Rec Room and VR Chat, and they're populated like virtual cities. You can kind of think of it like Paris and London and Tokyo. And we want to plant churches in these different virtual cities.
I'm really passionate to help people who can't otherwise find a community. And then also I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I don't think their attention spans would do well here. So worshiping as a family, that's something that we still do in a physical church as well.
Yeah. Do you attend physical church as well as VR church? I do not. I'm actually one of those people that are physically disabled and confined to my home. So yes, I only attend here. Where are you from?
My name is Zoe, and I'm from the Netherlands. I live in Gouda.
How long have you been coming to VR Church?
Well, this is actually my first time. It is a very new experience for me because I'm used to physical churches, but I have autism and I'm really, really sensitive to sounds and all the people around me. Right now, I think most of the people are muted, so you don't hear all the sounds around you, so it's way less tiring, and that's really nice.
Yes, absolutely. At the birth of any technology, there's going to be that period of time where it's early adopters, early innovators. In the diffusion of this technology, we're already seeing these leaps and bounds into form factor, price, where it's going to make it more accessible. All that technology is being worked on. Billions of dollars being spent at Google, Apple, Facebook to create an experience. And I don't even think we've seen the full fruition of what that technology is going to be. I think we're just starting.
Okay, so this was a really interesting video from the BBC. Hopefully you guys have watched it at home, about a virtual reality church where you can pick your avatar. And I see, Greg, for your avatar today, you've picked...
Jamiroquai.
Jamiroquai. That's a reference that none of our listeners will get.
This hair has got bounce.
Looking good, Greg. So what did you guys think of the video about virtual reality church?
I mean, it reminds me of Sims.
I'm back.
Nice. It reminds you of The Sims in what way?
Okay, sorry. No, I lost. Yeah, it reminds me of Sims. I mean, I get... I think it's a good idea. Obviously, I mean, there is the humor of, I think, was it Scott that you'd sent around, like, you know, everyone mocking a televangelists, and now we're all becoming them. You know, this whole beauty of, you know, we can from a distance kind of, oh, Jed, that's just nuts. There's no way. And yet now most churches are looking to see how they can either live stream or pre-record or have things out there, whether it be audio or visual. So yeah, I mean, everyone's going to do their thing in relation to trying to connect in with different platforms and groups. So yeah.
And what about you, Greg? What do you like? I think we've always talked on the show, like with kind of a certain amount of skepticism of of online platforms for church. And even when I released the tweet about responding to about the episodes that we did about responding to the coronavirus, somebody replied to it and said, "Oh, you're not making fun of Judah Smith now, I hope, or I hope you've apologized to Judah Smith, who's the guy who started Church Home." You know, when we talked about it, we talked about a virtual church with an app called Church Home that has no physical gathering, but it's just watch it on your phones, and like you can join small groups and stuff. And so somebody was like, "Oh, I hope you're coming back with your tail between your legs." Thanks, Johnny Somerville.
Johnny, of course.
No, but I'd like to double down on it though.
Yeah. And that's my instinct too. It is interesting looking at the difference in values between doing something as a substitute for physical meeting because physical meeting isn't possible and we still want to be connected to each other, rather than the starting point being the backup plan.
I mean, it's interesting because I remember when Phyllis Tickle was over at the first Rubicon, and she talked about Second Life and the church that existed there. And I mean, I went and got my own avatar because I was so like, I think Phyllis is wonderful. No, I did actually. I joined in and stuff like that. But it was interesting because she was talking about lots of stuff. And when she was talking about that, she was saying things like, you know, for example, Tony Campolo was punched when he spoke at that church. What kind of ethical, you know, what happens there in the digital realm? Can people be prosecuted? But then she took us a bit further and said, can you forgive someone in a digital space? Can you take communion in a digital space? Can you be baptized in a digital space? And now that seemed 10 years ago seemed like a long way away, but it was pressing. It was like, it was leaning into almost where we find ourselves right now, which is actually there is a virtual space that exists. And on that video, what I loved is that someone who was not able-bodied was able to, you know, feel free to walk through that world and not be judged by maybe what a lot of people had judged her by or him by. I love that the girl who had autism was able to switch off the sounds around her and felt more at peace there. And so there's so many benefits. And I've always been a fan of technology and digital spaces. I genuinely have been. But I do think that in conversations with different people around, you know, my PhD is actually in this area around how spiritual formation in a digital era. And one of the people I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with was a guy called Mike McCarr, Science Mike from the Liturgists.
Yeah.
And we
Former
talked
guest of the Graveyard Shift.
Yes, absolutely. And Rubicon, and and he talked extensively about. We talked extensively about what it was to. Is the digital space enough? Is it enough? And without putting words in his mouth, he kind of came around to the fact that no, it wasn't enough. And that's one of the problems they struggle with, even as premier international influencers in that space. But when it comes to the VR church thing, I was even talking to some artist friends of mine saying, guys, you're not on the road right now. Have you ever considered putting together a digital band and playing at this church? Why not? Why not?
Yeah.
It exists. So why wouldn't you do that? So I'm kind of fascinated with where it can go. So, I mean, I think the Judah Smith thing, it's Judah Smith, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing I found fascinating about it was that he called it home. And I suppose at the time I was kind of kicking back on the idea that a digital space could be a home. Fast forward to 2020, COVID-19. Also, our digital space is our home. We're right now sitting in each other's rooms, having a great conversation about what I hope is a good conversation about life and where we find ourselves. So, yeah, I'm a fan. I'm okay with it, actually. I think it's my concern is that it's an inaccessible platform to most people who lead churches today, especially in Ireland, because you're talking about post 50-year-olds mostly. Most people who lead churches are probably post 50, I'd say. And so I can't imagine them trying to navigate that space.
Yeah.
I do think though we have people who I know like within Kill, one of the things we've been trying to do is even having our audio services up online on email and whatnot. And for those who are of the older generation, they're getting their kids to kind of set them up on the web or with email and whatnot, which has been brilliant. So there's a desire for some to actually keep that connectivity, but I do think you're right. Like I think because it's not a platform that people would use here an awful lot, or at least and it's looked upon and ridiculed as we have, in relation to what this virtual church would look like. But there are the benefits. I mean, we've got a couple within our own church who. They need sign language, and so coming to a service is very difficult for them because obviously it's from distance, and it's difficult for them to hear. Some have vision impairing, so it's seeing how can those needs now be met. But it's also it's something for me. I'm thinking about when all this is over. It's not that those needs stop; those needs are still there. So how do we? And what do we do to actually? Okay, these needs are highlighted in a different way now. We need to deal with this from here on in, and that is an issue. And I think that's where the virtual church, it does meet and tailor. It gets tailored to. It is buffet church at its best. I would submit on that level where it can, but it does. It's not. It's not. It's dare I say? It's not fulfilling. It's not complete. It is bitty in some of that way.
Well, I think that depends on the platform that people are, or on the approach people are taking to it and the reasons that they're seeking it out. So, for example, the people in the video that we watched, for them, virtual reality is not a substitute for the real thing. For them, virtual reality is the only accessible way of them engaging with what is accessible to everyone else. And when something is accessible to everyone else but not accessible to them, by its very nature, it's exclusive. So if VR church is actually meeting the profound need of people who are made in the image of God, who the church currently structures and shapes itself in a way that is not accessible to them, then it is a wonderful leveler that invites people to the table. But what I think can so often happen in our world is that what is a profound creation for the sake of those who will have connect with it best becomes a convenient escape for others looking to disconnect from community or have an experience without intimacy. Do you know what I mean? And so it can be used. Churches can be created for the wrong reasons and the right reasons, in the right mediums and the wrong mediums, and people can attend for the right reasons and the wrong reasons. Like all those things can happen at the same time. The question comes back, as we were talking about in our last episode, of like, it's not just about what we're doing, it's about the motivation behind what we're doing. And so
Yeah.
if church is helping you, if we are creating an online platform for church that has a consumerist mentality, or based on my, like, or maybe that's an unfair judgment on my part, because who can tell what's in the heart of another? But if I perceive it to be, that's the category that I put it into in my head, whether I'm right or wrong on that, that doesn't mean that every virtual church or every digital church is consumerist. It means that some will be and some probably won't be. It comes down to the heart of the leader and the DNA of the organization or the gathering.
Yeah, and I think that the tricky thing is that, it's like one person's claustrophobia is another person's agoraphobia.
Yeah.
Like, so where one person might
yeah.
find intimacy in an online church, but struggle with intimacy in a Sunday morning,
For sure.
the vice versa is true.
Mhm.
And where it's, for me, it's accessibility thing. It's like for decades in Ireland, a person with disabilities couldn't come to church. It was like really difficult because of all the stairs, and it just wasn't accessible. But we built most churches or communities or community halls now have accessibility. So it's a tricky thing when it comes to, where do we find intimacy is really quite an interesting question. And right now, I think a lot of people are probably struggling with even the idea of what we're doing here, the three of us talking together. They might find this not very intimate at all. Yet for me, this is enough. Like, keep your distance. So
Greg's dream is social interactions with a red button at which he can terminate it at any point without anyone else being able to stop
it. but I do like face-to-face interaction. And even, when I've, been 6 feet apart from friends in a parking lot or in a park recently, it was great to just chat and not have to worry about all the technical. But I'm also an older guy. So like young adults, this is where the space they've been living in. My son Eden's been playing Xbox with his friends for years. This is no big deal. And so he's like, I chat with my friends. I'm hanging out every day with them. I'm like, oh, okay, fair enough. And so it's a hard one. I think you're right. It comes down to motivation, Scott. It comes down to, why are we involved? Why are we creating this? What's the purpose for it? And if it is to draw people into an intimate relationship, happy day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's doing what we normally do in relation to meeting the need of the people that come in physically into a church.
Right.
We're still trying to connect in, whether it be emotionally, socially. I mean, like one of the really concerning things at the moment, even when we're thinking about the pastoral needs that people have in this now virtual world, is, I mean, already there have been cases of domestic abuse that is going up. Alcoholism is going up. People's vices, whether it be porn or drugs, is going up because people have been separated. And I think this is where it's how you actually explain or express where the need for someone who's coming is an individual need coming into that space, but then how is that met by others who are also in that space in ways that it is not just a category of, okay, that's a phone call, that's an email, that's a waving at someone through a window, but there's an ongoing stance here that I think we're going to be facing for quite some time.
So I mean, how are you connecting in, Scott, now? Like, how are you guys connecting into that important, necessary, intimate relationship with friends and family members?
Simple. I mean, obviously, first priority here is our own home and our own family. So, like with Rue and the kids, like we're trying to do different things together. We're also giving each other the space to do. I mean, they both have their school stuff that they're getting done. We're trying to get out for walks here and there. The perk of having Levi is, okay, I'll take the dog out for the walk now, that sort of thing. So, but I think when you're going into extended areas, it is the text messages or saying hello from distance. I mean, even with people who are dropping in for not coming into the house for coffee, let's go for a walk, get a coffee, distance, so trying to do that as wisely as possible. But I'm also very aware for my own role and some of the things that are going to be coming up now in the next couple of days, if not weeks. That interaction, I need to be very mindful as to who I am interacting with because of the connectivity of what that means for those around too. But it's how you do. Like, I mean, yeah, it's just trying to be wise with what that looks like. That physical, even with distance. But it's also, I mean, when you have not connected to someone, it's like learning sign language in so many ways. Like, we're learning to communicate in very, very different ways. Like, I do not like communicating via email or text. I am far more of a verbal processor, as you both would know. You know, so on that level, it's a
Tell me
very,
about
I
it.
know, it's a very difficult thing for me to even hear when things are written down. I need that is a frustration, and I have that in myself, of that frustration too.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I think I mean, I found it difficult when I was in quarantine, in particular, when I was, going around to my parents' house to pick up posts that arrived or whatever, or to drop in a Mother's Day card that we had that Christina had written while wearing surgical gloves, and then held in with surgical gloved hands without touching anything else in the house, and then in the car until we drove all the way down, and she could place it on the doorstep of my parents, because that might seem ridiculous because the chances of us having it or anything was tiny, but you just don't take chances with other people's safety.
No.
So we're trying to figure out, okay, so doing that, and yet actually choosing to still drive down 40 minutes away and to stand in, by the car and to talk and to catch up as much as we can. The other day I visited and we talked through the window. We send each other WhatsApp videos of, my brother sends me WhatsApp videos of my nieces and nephews. And that helps us feel connected. We send videos back and forth.
It's lovely.
Because it's not the same, but it's also not nothing. And this like, we are not living in a world where we get the chance to have the optimal thing all the time. The world we're living in is a place where we can make the best of the opportunities that we have, and grieving the optimal while we have chances for something else that also, because taking those chances, like we want to be honest about, like, oh, this isn't the way I would want it to be, but with what I have, what can I do? And then that actually leads to, I think, learning new ways of actually to communicate and connect with each other. Because I think the connection, the older you are, the more profound this disconnection is. The younger you are, in many ways, that actually you don't notice you may not experience the absence in the same way, because you're a digital native who has always been in touch and connected to their friends, and for many it's actually their preferred way of being in contact with each other.
But I do think it's interesting when it comes.
I think it's interesting. I do.
Go, Greg, you have to talk to the second.
Go.
I'm just to pivot a little bit back to the VR church thing. I think that the idea of digital sacraments is quite a fascinating thing to me, because we are going to move to a place where rectors like yourself, Al, and Al soon to be, might have to marry people via Zoom. I mean, Zoom, the one thing about Zoom, which, this is not an ad, but if you go pro, you can have up to 100 people for 24 hours on one screen. Now that'd be chaotic, I think, to a certain extent, but I mean, what would it look like to project that on the church wall and for, to run church via Zoom? I mean, let's be honest, there's not many churches that have more than 100 people. If they do, they're probably lying. In Ireland anyways, trying to get the numbers up for the old census. But it's more that I think that, even the idea of like communion, a lot of people, it's an important part of our practice, of our ritual, of our tradition, and that's how a bad thing. It's be a really great healing thing and connecting thing. So what happens when rectors, or I know, just one second, says my internet is unstable. Am I back?
You're back.
You're
good.
Back?
When we heard everything, yep, you're fine.
Okay. And so it's interesting to me that, like, even the idea that priests can't do everything, we have always known that, and rectors can't do anything. And so the empowerment of lay people to take sanitized communion that has been prayed over to door? What does that look like, going forward? Are we going to have the power to lead people in a way we haven't done in a long time? I mean, all these things, I'm quite interested in seeing where we go, and actually in turn learning from those who've gone before us, like the VR Church.
Yeah, and I mean, two things on that. I think, well, like one of the things I've been encouraging when we've been doing the audio recording of pre-recorded service for communion, I'm encouraging people, get some bread, get some, break bread with whoever else you're in the house with, do communion, because actually that's the reality of what it is. Like, we are all called priests. And this is the difficulty that I think some rectors and some people are going to have.
Can I ask you out?
But
No, I'm not making. No, I'm actually. I want to ask you a question. I genuinely do want to ask you a question.
Okay.
I'm all about that.
I know you are.
Is that allowed underneath the current understanding of a rector's role within a church situation without having been ordained?
Well, I've lost you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. My internet connection now is unstable, as is maybe my theology, but my understanding of communion when people are called to break bread is it is not deemed to be just for one. And this has been something I know it's been a wrestle I've had. And before coming into Church of Ireland, being a Church of Ireland rector, I understand why it is done the way it is, and I respect that. I totally respect that, and I get it. But we are in a situation now where all those things that are meant to be good guidelines, it is not biblical law, and it's not biblical truth in the level of anyone can come together and when they are sitting there and reminding one another of the love and the beauty of all of who Jesus is, break bread with one another. Do that as a family. Do that with your friend. It is something that is important, that even when we are separate, when we are isolated, this is the reminder: you are not alone. My peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. This is not something that we are all, well, sorry, I haven't been able to have communion for the last 6 months because there was no one here to bless the bread. That just doesn't cut it, And if anyone, if for conversations I've had with one or two other different people, because there is the nervousness, whereas we can do this now, and in 6 months' time, if all of a sudden we get called in for a meeting, I'm okay with that, because I think, well, that's a meeting that we need to have. Because if we're saying that, no, the only place like this can be done, I mean, I've broken bread with people in car parks, let alone in hospitals, and stuff that we can bring. But now we're in a space where we are told physically we cannot connect. But this isn't a physical thing. This is a spiritual thing. And this is for everybody. It is not just for one to pass on. Jesus has done that. And so that's the space that we have, that we need to be. And it's not about giving the permission. It's about reminding people of the beauty of what they have themselves. Just because we've been used to one particular person doing this over generations or whatnot, there is a getting back to basics. I was talking to somebody, and I can't say who it was, but I was talking to somebody yesterday, and
Beyonce.
I was saying, yeah, well, I don't want to brag, but it was Jay-Z. But in the conversation, I was reminding, it's like people go back to what they think is the beginning. But actually, no, we go further back beyond that. And I was using the illustration of Mr. Beaver, there's a deeper magic. And that's what Aslan is. There is a deeper. It's not that our beginning, stop it, our beginning did not.
Your segues are like this. It's fantastic.
Oh, it's what I try. It's what I do. I mean, that 24-hour service with 100 people on Zoom for my sermon, it would be a dream.
No, can I ask you a question, though, real quick? Like, when it comes to,
apparently you can't ask a question based on your internet.
You cannot
obviously,
ask
I've been
any
working
question
in this world for 3. Is it?
Start the question again. You
start again.
Am I there? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously, I've been working in this world for 30 years now, and so I got a certain depth of understanding. But I'm going to ask it like I don't, because I prefer to do that. I can deny any culpability. So, when it comes to like, could you send out 100 Zoom invites, let's say, or 400 actually, I think you can get up to 400 times, to your congregants and say that we're having communion on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and that on their screen, they can see you, right?
Yep.
But on your screen, you hit Galleria or whatever it's called, and you can see all of them.
Yep.
And you say, whatever you have before you, I don't care if it's a digestive biscuit. I don't care if it's a wine gums sweet. I don't care if it's, but anyway, I don't, but this is going to be a symbol. Now we're talking about the Anglican Church. So we're talking about consubstantiation, which is not the changing of bread, it's just flesh and wine to blood, while transubstantiation within the Catholic tradition is different. We're talking from an Anglican perspective. Could you theoretically break bread with your community and it to count?
Yeah.
That would be an ecumenical matter.
Thanks, Dougal.
I've lost you all.
I said that would be an ecumenical matter. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, like for me, when we, again, my internet connection is unstable. It is one of those things where I think it's common sense from God's perspective of, I want you to partake in this. Use your digestive biscuit, use your wine gums, use whatever it is. I don't think the underground church all around the world in the different spaces are going, we need to have somebody to come in to do this for us. That's not what this was. And reminding ourselves again. And actually, there is a beauty of just this last week. We've had the Feast of the Annunciation, of where Jesus is coming. Mary, you up for this? Oh, wow, this is nuts. Okay. And she is now holding Jesus in pregnancy. And then the beauty of us coming into Easter Holy Week, of really thinking and reflecting as to what this means for me, not just for the church, but actually because I cannot get connected in different ways as an individual, as someone who has this relationship, as someone who may not even have this relationship. Am I being invited to break bread? Am I being invited to dip my bread in the wine? And I think the answer is very much yes. All are welcome.
Scott?
That's opened up some really interesting thoughts. I'm trying to think how
you're welcome.
You, my friend, are the gift that keeps on giving. As we do during the communion service, I thank God for you in the same way and say, thank you, God, for your gift beyond words. I think what it would be like, wondering about people who are low church and high church, people who are Anglican, not Anglican, how they would feel listening to this conversation.
Of course, high church. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Forgive me. You're correct to point out there's Anglo-Catholics from a higher church tradition that would believe in transubstantiation as well. So you're right.
Well, and I guess I'm being like, there is something of privilege to the world that we just left 3 weeks ago, where we could gather easily, where we could set up doctrinal and theological and liturgical standards by which everyone had to live, and we never had to ask difficult questions about what will life be like in a pandemic, what will it mean to gather in a digital space, what will it mean for families to be disconnected from the church community that has been such a central part of their life together, their journey together, and their growing towards God. Those are almost abstractions. I'm trying to think about what is central, and I'm just going, however it is we meet, however it is we make peace, however it is we remember his death and resurrection, God is present. And God is present whether we're remembering it or not. And God chooses to be actively present in our lives. And is present even to the moments where we are not present to him. And so that's the thing I think I have to come back to for myself, is that at the end of the day, the God who is endlessly and abundantly immanent and present is present in all things. I don't know how that affects our sacramental theology, but I know that God doesn't live in liturgical boxes we make for him. Our
Yeah,
best liturgy is an attempt to describe and celebrate the goodness of him and our experience of him and his invitation to us to be part of a force of that goodness that is transformative to the world around us. So I think that's what I come back to as like a kind of a base note. It also helps protect myself from, you know, because Alan's got a job for life, but I'm only at the beginning of the journey. So I can't take the kind of chances Al takes.
I mean, the God within is a God that surrounds. I mean, and you're right. All we can do is our best to create ways, whether it's art or writing or sacraments, to capture a glimpse of God and to hold it lightly in our hands and to open to give to others. And I think that, but I do think it's very interesting that I'm wondering now if this goes on for months on end, and will people get to a point where they're like, well, do I actually need the church? Do I actually need a rector any longer? Do I actually need these things that generation?
Whoa there, buddy.
No,
Pump the brakes there, pal.
Yeah.
that generationally that's been part of our. It's been part of who we are. It's been part of our culture. It's been part of our DNA. It's you know, people grow up in church, and we've seen a fall off over the last few decades. But do you think this will affect going forward people's understanding of even need for institution or institutional leadership when it comes to this, because they've realized that Sundays they don't need to be in church? They realize they can possibly do communion on their own. They realize that, do you know what I'm saying? When you remove a need, all of a sudden people sometimes realize it wasn't a need in the first place. I'm just curious to find out your thoughts on that.
I think the real beauty, and there is and please hear me right when I say this, there is a part of me that is actually wanting to use this opportunity in the best possible way, because I think this, what is going on with COVID-19, I do not believe that this has been sent from God. I do not believe that this is a lesson for us, and we can learn from it, and we can move, and we can change, and we can adapt. But I really think actually that the big key question for me, and I know like even one that we did a couple of weeks ago on discipleship, and the difficulty I've had in the last number of months of just really the sad acknowledgement of discipleship is so difficult to do as a rector, because you're involved with so many meetings and decisions and other things that you sometimes lose out on the relational element of stuff, of just sitting down with someone, praying with them, walking along journey, blah blah blah. Whereas this actually now is giving that openness to see, well, where are we with our relationships? Where are we with our discipleship? Because actually that's what stands. The institution, big, I mean, and so, well, I'm glad you interrupted me there, but the institution we need to be really mindful of, in that I think even with our sacramental theology, we have to hold it with an open hand. We cannot say, no, this is the only way, because usually 9 times out of 10, when we say this is the only way, what I'm really saying is this is my way, and this is my comfort, and this is my theology. This is not, and God's like, oh, I'm with you. I mean, there are other ways, but I'm totally with you because I love you. And I think we need to be far more flexible and open, as Holy Spirit is, in how she all like in moving in so many ways as to what that looks like, in saying this is what I want people to be open for in our theology. That actually it's a practical theology.
So do you think the church, the future has a church?
I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Scott,
I think the church is going to have to answer the same question that a lot of businesses.
Alan has to say yes. Alan has to say yes. I'm joking. You know, job protection. You know.
I think some churches have a future and some churches don't, and I think it's they're going to have to ask the same questions of themselves during this crisis that businesses are, and that's when everything closed down, did you lose customers or a community?
Ooh.
Yeah.
And the level of
That's good.
connection that you have in your community, it will transcend
Mhm.
crisis. It will be the thing that bonds together in
Mhm.
crisis and overcomes it for the sake of friend, neighbor, and enemy.
Yeah.
But if you have customers and you think of your church in terms of how you meet the needs of your consumers rather than how the people who are part of your community meet the needs of your neighborhood, then you may not survive this, because they'll either find a different product or they'll realize that what you were selling them wasn't necessary all along. So
Exactly.
that for me is the big question churches need to be asking of themselves.
Ooh, that's good. I like that.
That'll
That's good.
preach.
No, I mean, and it's. I think these are all necessary questions to be asking, because if anything, the VR church showed is that, like ourselves, even we might have even given it a hard time in the past, but they're still there. They're still going. They've not. Nothing's changed for them. They're still gathering, right? They're not. There's no social distancing on VR church.
No. Do you know what I love about it, though? The reason that I know about it is because it was a fascinating thing that people were doing, and a journalist went and observed it. I didn't find out about it from an Instagram ad that was trying to to plug me into something that somebody else was trying to do. Do you know what I mean? We found out about it because this was a way in which people had created a more accessible church for a wider variety of people. I love that. I'm all for that, because the heart is for the people, not the product. Whereas the reason that I've heard about these other things, these other movements, is because it's about product first that needs people to function. Whereas this seems like it was a group of people who found a way to gather that now can be understood as a product. But if the product died away, those people would still find a way to gather. So asking that question, like, if you stopped organizing it, would it keep happening? And that's where you see the depth of relationship and trust and intimacy and authenticity there is there.
Yeah. And I think that moving forward, I mean, I know my internet connection is unstable. It just comes up all the time. I mean, I've got but anyways, it's
how the tables have turned.
But I do think going forward that customer, consumer, community question is definitely got to be almost a threshold people need to cross every time they start talking about this area, and I think that, but I think even personally, because I know we started this conversation about what books are we reading, how are we keeping our heads in a good space, I mean, going forward, I generally hope that people understand, like my wife had a party the other night with 7 of her friends on Zoom. And they laugh their heads off. They sure, they're seeing each other from a distance on walks around the neighborhood, but they were there having beverages and also having a great time. And I've been doing stuff similar with one-to-ones, but a lot of times I try to convince myself, oh, it's good for them. But actually, it's really necessary and important for me to have these conversations too, whether it's on WhatsApp or whether it's on a regular phone. Those things still exist.
Gross.
I know, but the funny thing about those things, you never have an unstable connection on a regular phone, do you?
Well, the relationship might have an instability that the technology doesn't.
The past is the future. Mark my words.
Oh boy.
Excellent. Well, cheers, lads. We'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Talk soon.
See you guys.
Ciao, ciao. Greg.
Al Scott.
Scott. Greg.
Al Scott.
Scott.
Alan and Greg.
Greg. Scott.